Hello and welcome to episode 43 of the Virtual Velo Podcast with me, Emma Martin, and my co-host, Chris Schwenker. Today we have two powerhouses of Australian e-cycling here with us, Josh Harris and Kate Trdin.
Yes, it's really exciting. I'm looking forward to speaking to them both. When I founded the Zommunique 3 years ago, I envisioned a multi-platform model in which cycling esports would develop as a unique standalone discipline, and the athletes would evolve to specialize in the nuances of being a cycling esports racer. Our guests embody that vision, and the recently announced multi-platform race series we'll be introducing today is the next step in that evolution.
Yeah, it is going to be, I know it's going to be a phenomenal chat today. So I'm going to start with introducing our guest, Josh Harris. You have held the world record for the beer mile, which is something after my own heart, and we may well come on to that very quickly. But also the Zwift Grand Prix win earlier on this season, the Epics Point race on January the 11th, fourth overall in the Zwift Games on March the 17th, second in the Australian Cycling Esports National Championships this year. However, despite all this success, Josh, what can I say? Kate, she has the jersey. She is the reigning 2024 Australian Cycling Esports National Champion. Well, I don't know about you, but I think that is an absolute power couple that we have on the programme today, Chris. I am really looking forward to this.
So am I. I'm actually really fascinated when I did the interview with Josh. I guess it was maybe over a year ago now, and this topic of the beer mile came up, and you might not believe this, Emma, but I enjoy a nice pint every now and then. So I'm interested in breaking down how this goes. Like, I assume that you're not drinking porters and stouts like I would enjoy, Josh, when you're doing the beer mile.
So I used to be a little bit of a party boy when I was a little bit younger, and with the running background, it kind of went hand in hand with trying out the beer mile, which a lot of runners have done. And yeah, I got to go to the World Championships for a few times, which was pretty fun, and certainly something that people still like to bring up in interviews and that kind of thing.
Well, I just want to how does it work? What are the nuts and bolts of this? Like, what kind of beer are you drinking? How does you finish a lap and then you chug a beer? Or are you running with the bottle of beer and then chucking it to somebody?
Yeah, so it's essentially, for the US people out there, 12 ounce from a bottle or can. Drink that essentially at the finish line, run a 400 meter lap of the track, and then repeat that 4 times.
So are you feeling it towards the end? Are you like running into other people's lanes? Is this an issue?
Well, it's over within 5 minutes at that level, so it's more once you're finished. Yeah, you're pretty happy, and with the running endorphins there as well, it's a good time.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I did, before I came on air, take a look at the current world record. It's 4 minutes, 28 seconds. Now, for me, I have a running background in endurance off-road running, but that has got to be a good mile time, regardless of drinking beer. So here in the UK, we have the Rafa Supercross, or we had the Rafa Supercross, and at Full Speed Events we used to work on that event. That has what they call the tequila shortcut in a cyclocross race. So each lap of the cyclocross race, you can choose to take the tequila shortcut, or you can ride the full lap of the course. Obviously, 7 to 8 laps during this hour's cyclocross race. And the dodgy moment was always when the riders got off of their bikes after they'd crossed the finish line, not necessarily during the actual race itself. Now, was that the same during the beer mile?
Yeah, 100%. Usually 30 minutes after the event, when people are into their 5th, 6th or 7th, things start to get a little bit that way.
Yeah, well, perhaps we should move on from running, Chris, and start talking about cycling. I could probably talk about running for a very long time, but we won't. But so indoor cycling, I'm going to ask you both the same question to start with. Do you consider yourselves indoor specialists?
I do, 100%. I have barely ridden on the road in the last few years, unless I've had to. It just suits my lack of cycling background. I've found a bit of a niche in it, and I just have so much fun with it and love it. So yeah, 100% for me.
What about you, Kate?
Yeah, I'd agree. I've recently started to dabble in a bit outdoors, but I think, just feeling more comfortable indoors and have found the whole process a bit more accessible overall. So, yes.
Do you think then that e-cycling opens a doorway and a pathway into cycling that may not have been available before to other athletes perhaps switching over due to injury or for any other reason?
Yeah, so there are people from other sports, such as running's a good one that have the power, but not necessarily the bike handling skills to kind of be successful in a pro European peloton. But then you also find people like Kate who picked it up basically because I did it, and then have found that they've got the talent just kind of sitting there, which is really quite unbelievable. When now she's starting to dabble in the road, and like I wouldn't be surprised if she went quite well if she wanted to pursue that as well.
It's interesting to me because I've been kind of advocating for this indoor specialist for years, and I always wonder what that means to the athletes. What does it mean to you to be an indoor specialist? How would you define it? What is the future like for an athlete like you, Josh, or like you, Kate?
I think it's still evolving and we're still kind of figuring that out as we go, largely, I guess. But yeah, I guess just I think of it in terms of having knowledge of the different platforms and how the dynamics work, and just enjoying the racing.
So one of the things that I know, Josh, being an indoor specialist, you have every badge for the major 3 platforms. You've done every route on Zwift, including all the Rebel routes and all the climbing portals. You've done all the routes on Indy Velo, and they just keep on adding them. So it's kind of something to do these days. And you've done all the routes on My Wish as well. So does that, the multi-platform part of it, is that part of the definition of indoor specialist for you?
Yeah, I think so. I started off 100% Zwift, obviously, as a lot of people did. And then with the World Champs announcement, it was pretty much the next day I woke up and I considered that, okay, I need to explore all the options, and no longer am I a Zwifter, I'm an esports cyclist. So that's all been part of that. And obviously they're the 2 main ones with the key races being held. But Indy Velo is just such a good platform, and so like I cannot speak more highly of Indy Velo. So I spend so much time on there just because I see the potential in it, and I really get a lot out of it as well.
Yeah, Kate, I really want to go back to this concept of starting indoor cycling in 2022 and winning the Australian National Championships in 2024, because that is a phenomenal sort of Hollywood level story if you really look at it. But you have to have some form of sporting background.
I did a lot of different things growing up, but yeah, like I never really stuck with anything. I would always change from thing to thing, just depending on what age I was and what sports were on offer at school and things like that. So I was always sporty, and then moved into doing some running and some triathlons kind of in my early 20s, which then led into the cycling quite nicely.
In terms of, I mean, you say dabbled in some triathlon. Are you talking just sort of locally in the region? Are you talking, on a potential national level? That innate ability in you, has it just shone through indoor cycling, or did you see that you maybe possibly be able to take sport to a level where you are now in any of those other sports that you tried as growing up?
No, I think cycling's pretty unique for me. I definitely don't think I was a decent triathlete at kind of a local level, but I don't think that I necessarily had the potential to improve as much as I have with cycling. But I've always had fairly good, I would say, like sprinting genetics across different things. So I think we've really seen that come out in my cycling.
It's fascinating because one of the major benefits of virtual cycling is the accessibility, right? The chances are that if you never found virtual cycling, or I'll give Josh the credit, if you never found Josh, then there's a pretty good chance that you wouldn't be the Australian Esports National Champion, right? So it's you see how virtual cycling opens up a whole new world for people, especially women athletes, because if you rocked up to a road race, right? You'd be stuck with the masters guys, or you'd be stuck with the juniors. And I know that, I'm not proud of this, but I know when I used to race on the road, when we had gals in the field, the first part of the race was to drop the women, and then we started our race after that, right? And that's just the way it is, right? And it makes it, it's kind of one of these things where, had you not started esports, you would not have the level that you've reached today. And I think it's really interesting. Josh, as part of the indoor specialist, a lot of the, since the sport is just developing, there are a lot of factors that we haven't addressed yet. And I noticed that recently you announced that you're sponsored. I'm curious to kind of get a sense of, are you being sponsored as an esports athlete? Are you being sponsored for your road aspects of what you're doing? The whole economics of cycling esports is something that we have yet to figure out. In fact, I can't even envision a model for it right now. Are sponsored athletes the wave of the future in our sport?
I hope so. So the way my current sponsorship deal with Mackay Cycles came about was Kyle, who runs the shop up there. He was at the Nationals, and he's right into his Zwifting and stuff as well. And I guess he saw potential in the work that I'm doing and how kind of into esports I am, and he kind of put forward a bit of a proposal to me, and yeah, the rest is history. I'm a couple of weeks into the deal, and honestly, the new bike, new shoes, I feel like I don't know, maybe my position and the old bike were not very good, because I instantly feel like I've jumped up probably 5% in the last week. So yeah, it's been a great start.
Yeah, that's certainly worth it right there. If not for him, but for you. So how are you going to be actionable there? What benefit will you bring to a sponsor as an indoor specialist?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to just trying to do a little bit more of those social things, like streaming and that kind of thing, which I've done a few streams previously, but tended to be a bit more unlisted, whereas from now I'll probably be a little bit more public with it. The old Instagram, I'll be a little bit more prominent on there, which I probably haven't been for my running sponsor, which I still actually have somehow over the past few years.
So Kate, are you sponsored as well?
No, not me. Just Josh.
So the value of the Australian national jersey, right? The topic always comes up. Does the esports, World Championship jersey mean anything to the athletes? It actually obviously means something to them, but do they receive a benefit from it? You would think that as a female in the sport, that you would be very appealing to a sponsor. Is that something that you're interested in doing down the line? Have there been any discussions as far as that's concerned?
It's definitely something I'd be interested in, but no, I don't think there's been a whole lot of additional opportunity arise from the Nationals win, other than just exposure, I guess, and yeah, more people talking, which is always a good thing.
It's really interesting, isn't it, Kate? Because if you take a look at people like Kolchinsky, Alex Morris, for example, as well, both who've really started out on esports platforms and now moving into hill climbing outdoors, moving into road racing with the professional peloton, and both of them achieving phenomenal things. It's really interesting to see different athletes taking different pathways, and whether you stay with esports and e-cycling or whether you make that transition. And you've talked a little bit about wanting to sort of dabble in road racing. Are you dabbling yet? How's it going?
I've done one local road race, and that's about as far as my dabble has extended thus far, but hoping kind of when I finish up uni that I'll have a bit more time to explore that a bit further.
And that balance has got to be quite tricky, hasn't it? Because you are finishing off a master's degree at the moment, aren't you? And balancing that with your sporting life and transitioning your sporting life must be quite a juggle at the moment.
Yeah, and it's actually harder than most people think, I believe, as well, to balance the esports and the outdoor road stuff, because the demands are quite different between the two, I would say.
And what would you say was the key difference that you're finding?
Just like having to get those longer rides in for the outdoor stuff and potentially losing a bit of that kind of punch that you really need for esports.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It is a different discipline, isn't it, in terms of sort of training and how and what you deliver during a race with that sort of 1 hour deadline and the punchier style of racing versus longer road racing and other types of disciplines?
The whole versatility of esports cycling, you had to show a tremendous amount of that for the Zwift Games, Josh. You didn't win every race, but you went into the final race, the climb, in first place, and you had a chance to win the overall because you were consistent and you had all the qualities of an all-arounder. Give us a little sense of how you felt about the Zwift Games, how you felt about the event, what you thought of the format, the stages, your performance, the guys that came out to race, and the outcome of it, and also might as well mention it too, the way the prize money was structured and how it motivated the athletes also.
So when the Zwift Games was announced, I was super excited because it was a chance to have multiple opportunities. My previous experience at the world level was the top 30 format at the Worlds the year before, and I was still probably so early in my cycling esports career that I just didn't quite have that sprint then. So I went into the Zwift Games thinking, well, if the sprint doesn't go so well, I've got 2 more opportunities for some success. And I honestly had no expectations of finishing as high up as I did. I nailed the finish in all of those sprint races, like for my physiology to almost perfection to make that final 10, and that set up a good result in the second race, which I kind of expected. And I really didn't expect to go into the climb in that position, and I was super nervous just because it wasn't a position that I expected to be in. And I know a lot of people at that stage had me kind of locked in to win it, but a lot of the really top climbers showed up and just didn't quite have it on the day. But yeah, I loved everything about it. It was awesome.
Yeah, I think that an underappreciated part of virtual cycling is that there's real competition there. Like, there's a lot of pressure on you. I'm sure you were in the pen before that race, and you were really feeling the pressure, right? This is real racing at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it was essentially a time trial going straight up the Alp, and then knowing that the level of the field that were there too, and the 4 or 5 guys that you had to mark, you basically just had to hold on with them as long as you could until the Zwift Games slipped out of reach. Really, it was a great 3 weeks, and yeah, probably my favorite esports experience that whole campaign, I think.
Well, that's a huge statement. I know that you and I were talking about it because it also corresponded with your nationals, and I always feel terrible for the racers in the Southern Hemisphere because you get a raw deal with the times that you have to race, and there really is there's a huge bias towards the Northern Hemisphere. Let's just face it, right? You're kind of like an afterthought down there, and it's hopefully it's something that will change. But I admire you for the times that you're racing and the ability to perform at that level at those times and under pretty unique circumstances. Did you race in the Zwift Games, Kate?
I did one. I think I did the sprint. I can't even remember now. It wasn't very memorable. I was going through a bit of a rough patch with training and things, so just decided to focus on the nationals, which paid off, so I'm happy I did.
And it's interesting, isn't it, making those choices about what is the next target, what are you focusing on, because there is a lot out there, isn't there, that you could choose to do.
Yeah, it's really getting to the point for me, I think, where it's important to look kind of 12 months ahead and be quite selective. Otherwise, you just end up kind of chasing your tail, trying to do everything and not really doing anything well.
Now, Josh, you've mentioned your enjoyment of Indie Velo and how much you like that platform. We've talked about the Zwift Games. Both of you have also dabbled, I think, in the My Wish Sunday Race Club. One of the things that I found quite interesting this week, after obviously the commentary on the Sunday Race Club, was I had a number of the riders get in contact with me to talk about the new dynamics that are starting to come into play and that they've been testing on the team time trial and they've been testing on the Sunday Race Club, and them absolutely really liking the feel of the race and the fact that it felt very different this week, which I think a lot of the community are going to really be very pleased about. How did you find your experiences on the Sunday Race Club, and how are you feeling around, that platform hosting the Worlds and your experiences on it?
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to testing out the dynamics because they're going to be obviously in play at the Worlds, which is the goal for the next kind of 5 months. In terms of my experience, I found myself in that no man's land position where I wasn't getting any top fives, and I just kind of felt like it was kind of demotivating. You'd get to the same climb every week and you'd see the top five go up the road. And after a few months of that, I stopped. I wasn't enjoying it at the time. It was at 9 p.m. at night for the men, our time on a Sunday night. And I kind of thought to myself, let's focus on the Zwift Games and then come back when I feel ready. And I've kept an eye on the platform the whole time since, and I'm looking forward to the dynamics because obviously Worlds is the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole prize money factor I can see can be very motivating, but if you're not in the top five, then it could be very demotivating. I've thought for quite some time that they stress the fact that there's money to be won on the platform, but it's not really if you're not in the top five. I think maybe they would be better to kind of reevaluate that. But on the other hand, Kate, as a female racer, you have the opportunity to win money on a consistent basis. How did you find the racing on the Sunday Race Club in My Wish and the whole dynamic there?
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. It's a very different style of racing to Zwift. In a lot of ways, I think it's almost more like outdoor racing, where you're doing a lot more efforts kind of around your FTP. But yeah, I mean, I kind of just use it as a tool to train those kinds of zones and efforts and then jump back on Zwift when I want to do a bit of that.
Yeah, having the options available is certainly appealing these days. A couple of years ago, I don't know when you started, Josh, but when I started virtual cycling in 2017, there weren't a lot of options. In fact, I think there was only like one world on Zwift that we could use. So it certainly has come a long way from there. And so has the esports worlds. You speak about how the Sunday Race Club is like racing outdoors, but the format for the worlds is far from that. Josh, I want to get your opinion of the formats. And I'm just going to quote something that Matt Smithson has said on this podcast, and to me personally. They don't want to replicate outdoor racing indoors. They want these worlds to be something totally different, an evolution of the sport. I'm just curious what you think of the format, and are you looking forward to it? Is it something that you feel that you can do well in? There's a little bit of something for everybody, which is another thing that they've also tried to incorporate here, is to make it so that it's not just a sprinting race, it's not just a climbing race. Even a puncher can excel at this.
Yeah, well, I love the format, but I'm looking forward to getting a chance to do something that remotely resembles the format. Like, we're getting to the time where I want to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, that's interesting that you say that, because you're going to have that chance very soon. I have it on good information. But we can move on from that, because I don't want to get myself into any trouble. But so just let's speak about the formats themselves. The first race is something we've never seen before. That Formula One, kicking through the sprint. You have as many times as you can. I don't know how many races does Australia they bring into the world.
Firstly, Chris, to make that race, you need to be in the top 20 at the semi-finals. So the semi-final formats I'll think about before I think about the segment sprint. Australia's got 10 males, which is fantastic. We did really well at 22 worlds with first, second and fourth. So we've got the full quota, which is obviously a good thing to have numbers going into the semis.
Thanks for pointing that out, Judge. I'm a little bit ahead of myself. I already have you there, which is I don't want to jinx you, so apologize for that.
No, that semi-finals in early September is going to be a really interesting target, isn't it? Because those two races will replicate the second and third races of the final, and that sprint race come in as the first one. And you mentioned Australia has 10 men in terms of spaces to go to that semi-final lineup at the beginning of September. It also has the opportunity for 5 women. Kate, I'm assuming it's one of your targets this year.
Yeah, absolutely. We still haven't heard from Aus Cycling as to the qualifying pathway, but yeah, fingers crossed that results from nationals kind of help with that. But yeah,
and I'm also thinking it's almost 2 months between the semi-finals and the finals, from the beginning of September to the end of October. Now that has got to be a decent amount of training preparation if you do qualify in that top 20.
For me, I think, and Kate's probably the same, you probably have to try and peak for the semi-final, because there are 20 fantastic males and females that are going to make that final. So look, to make that 20, and I think Kate and I have spoke about it, if one of us can get on the plane, that's probably the main goal achieved. And as you say, there's a lot of training time from there, but yeah, going to have to treat that first date like it's everything.
It's interesting you say get on the plane, because I know that in the interview that I did with you, Kate, you specifically mentioned that it would be really cool to go to the live event final in Abu Dhabi. I just want to get a indication from you as to why. Is it the live event format? Is it having the opportunity through esports to actually see a different part of the world, which you would never think would be something that would be appealing about, racing from your basement?
Yeah, I think everything, and particularly after doing the live final for nationals and getting to meet the other racers and things, and just how cool that was, it would be awesome to do it again.
And did that live final really add a different dimension, do you think, from actually racing standardly at home in terms of e-cycling versus all coming together and actually seeing your opponents in real life? Did it add an extra dynamic to the racing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And yeah, it was just such a nice opportunity to, I guess, connect with these people who you're racing all the time and you kind of know, but you've never actually met.
Yeah, so the event looked amazing. The venue was top notch. The way that they set it up, the lights everywhere, the big huge screens, the way that they had you guys positioned, and the racing. And I love the very small field format. Just had 3 or 4. How many was it? 4 or 5 people racing each other.
Yeah, we had 10, which was split into 2 semis of 5 riders. The first 3 went through to the final 6.
Right. So there was a lot on the line for every single racer. Every move that went up the road, you had to counter everything that was there. The short races, the cool venue, all of that was amazing. I know that David Larpartien was on hand. The head of Australian Olympic Union was on hand. There was a lot on the line for not only for the racers, but also for the organizations and the federation. And there were some issues, which seems to be something that plagues these live events. I know that you had a pretty visceral reaction when it happened initially. So can you explain that and then go through your thought process?
Yeah, so we were in the final, probably 5 or 6K to go. Not much had happened. It was probably coming down to a sprint. And I was quite happy for that. And then one of the riders' bikes had already had a dropout probably 10K before, and they didn't do anything. And then it happened to me, and it was an interesting thought process because it wasn't my fault in the slightest. So part of me was not that disappointed because it was completely out of my control, nothing of my doing. But then at the same time, we're at an event that could set a precedent for future events. So something in my head just kind of told me to make like a bit of a scene about it, even if it was probably more of a show than anything, to possibly just try and get something done about it or come up with a resolution, which it actually worked in the end, and we got a rerun, and I think they probably came up with some good resolutions out of it and maybe some ideas for what happens in the future in that kind of thing. But personally at the time I was like, well, yeah, out of my control. So, but yeah, I'll put on a bit of a show.
That's interesting that you say that, because I didn't get that from you, and it's actually quite admirable, because in the position that I'm in, that's basically what I'm trying to do, is raise awareness of the sport and trying to make an impact. And as somebody who is an indoor specialist who has so much on the line here, to act as an ambassador like that is really admirable. I'm really I'm glad that I asked you that question. Pivoting, they were able to resolve the issues. They set you back out, but it wasn't the same race. They cut down the distance, right? It ended up being more of a sprint, which maybe that was to your benefit, Kate. I don't know. So, Josh, what do you think about them then not running it back, just trying making it shorter so there was less chance that something was going to get messed up? And then how did that play into your eventual victory, Kate?
Yeah, so from my point of view, because they then ran Kate's race first, it was so exciting to watch Kate win. I kind of just wanted to get it done by that stage. We're quite tired. We'd been there for hours. I was happy for it to kind of be short and not much to happen, because my sprinting and the timing had been going quite well. So yeah, I was fine with it by that stage. But yeah, Kate should talk about her fantastic win and how it played out for her.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't complaining about having it shortened. I don't know that it would have necessarily changed the outcome, but I think, yeah, just getting to the end of a long day, it probably reduced that amount of time really needing to concentrate, which, yeah, I think definitely helped. And yeah, it was a good outcome at the end of the day.
So when you kicked the first time, Kate, with, about 400-ish meters to go, did you think you'd done enough?
I don't think I was even thinking about it at that stage. I just went to not get dropped when the girls ahead of me started to put the power down, and then I just knew that I had to keep going because I had so much momentum, and that if I stopped and then tried to kick again, that I'd just lose too much speed. So yeah, it just ended up being like, I think I did my 1 minute PB for the season in that race. So yeah.
Perfect timing to put a PB in over 1 minute. Australian national champions. Yeah. The question is, do you have an in real life jersey as well, or just a virtual one?
Yes, I do. It's quite big, but I do have one.
And have you slept in it?
No.
Oh!
Yes, but however, for my birthday, Josh collaborated with Sai from Level Velo and made me a nice, proper fitting indoor jersey and bibs. So very happy with that.
And I'm assuming you race in that.
Yes.
Excellent.
I've seen it. It's quite sharp. We should certainly give a shout out to former co-host Cy Bradley. He does a great job with Level Velo. We spoke about having the options. We spoke about you excelling on multiple platforms. There was an announcement just last week of a new series that's going to be incorporating the three major platforms. I like to call it the three major platforms: Zwift, MyWhoosh, and Indie Velo. The founder of Flamme Rouge Racing. I know. Have you ever done any of those races, Josh or Kate? The Flamme Rouge Racing races?
Yeah, I've done quite a few of the tours over the years, and yeah, Rich really puts a lot of time into organising his events, and this one seems pretty pioneering.
How would you describe those events? They're GC based. They're fashioned after world tours in length, duration, and brutalness. Right? They're usually brutal races.
Yeah. He's not afraid to throw some climbing in there, but one thing that he's done the last few years, he listens to the people. And initially, from my time zone, there was no chance of winning the GC how it worked, because it was simply based on who had the biggest group to draft, did the fastest times. But he's listened to feedback like that, and he's changed the time system, and it gives everyone, regardless of where they are around the world, a chance to win the GC. So yeah, he always listens to his crowd, that's for sure.
So speaking of listening to people, Rich and I had a conversation about the possible multi-platform model, and Sai and I have been speaking about it for over a year. I'm delighted that this is finally actually coming to fruition, because there is a huge impact that can come out of this. But Emma, can you maybe describe what Rich is planning here for the Mytikas Games? Can you give us just a basic rundown of the format?
Well, it is indeed absolutely epic, yet again, from Flamme Rouge Racing. And if his races are meant to be grueling, this is going to be an absolutely outstanding epic, because 15 events over 17 days across 3 platforms. Models on the Olympics. So if you head over to Flamme Rouge Racing, or on some of the Discord channels at the moment, and you can head over to Flamme Rouge Discord as well, you can see a beautiful graphic that explains it in a little more detail, but based on those Olympic events. So, for example, 8 track events, 2 field events, 5 road events, things like the high jump, how high can you climb? The long jump, how far can you go in a set time? So he really has taken that sort of Olympic genre and tried to model it into a race format, and it looks really exciting. A lot to unpick, I think, because there is so much in there, and I think people getting their heads around how they do it. Josh, you mentioned time zones across the world and those types of things, but it's looking like it is going to be a really epic proportion of racing.
Is that something that you think, Josh, or you, Kate, you'd be interested in? Like to me, it gives the racer, or just the recreational racer, a little bit of motivation. Like they may not normally try Indie Velo or MyWhoosh, but the fact that Flamme Rouge Racing has such a broad and loyal following, that maybe it brings people to these platforms that maybe wouldn't be there. Or even somebody like on the elite level, like the two of you, being able to test things out with other people and having that opportunity. Is that something that's appealing to racers of your level?
Yeah, I definitely think I'll be using some of the events as part of that lead up for the semi-final for Worlds. And I think Rich has said he's happy for people to stay on the platform that they ride and do the events on there, which is great. But then for people like us that are across multiple platforms, we'll have to make decisions on which of the three we're racing on. But I know for me, I'll be jumping in the ones that kind of fit my preparation, and I think Kate's probably the same.
And it is a really interesting model, isn't it? Because, like you've just said there, Josh, sticking to a platform that you know and love is a possibility within this race format. Trying out a platform that you've never tried out before is also a possibility with the race format, and may actually bring people into a new platform that they may not have tried unless this race series had been put on. So it really does bring something quite different to the arena. And I'm sort of wondering whether this is the starting point. Chris, you mentioned about, having talked to Rich for some time about this, and you and Si talking about multi-platform models. I wonder whether this is the start of more of that type of activity or more creativity across esports itself.
The way that I look at it, this is groundbreaking for the sport, right? If we can, if Rich, with all the hard work that he's going to be doing, it's, trust me, I know that he's going out there with this. He's taking a lot of risk, and he has to do a ton of work. But if this can be a proof of concept for perhaps a UCI international calendar and ranking system down the road, I know that we're in a position where the platforms aren't too keen on cooperating with each other. In fact, they've been kind of nasty to each other on occasions, especially recently. If they're forced into some kind of a cooperation, or see that they can perhaps work together for the common good, maybe that is something that will move the sport down the line. But in addition to just having the ability to highlight what each platform does best so that people can see, and you don't have to choose, right? You don't have to be in the Zwift tribe. You don't have to be in the Indie Velo tribe. You don't have to be in the MyWish tribe. You can be in the indoor specialist tribe and go on Zwift if you want to hang out with your buddies, go on Indie Velo if you want to race some bots, or, have some real strict performance checks, go on, do the Sunday Race Club if you want to have to breathe through your ears for an hour and a half. There's always a reason for the different platforms and the motivations for that. And I think it's really exciting that we've gotten to this level, because let's face it, it's not an easy thing to do, and it's not going to be something that everybody is going to digest well.
Josh, Kate, you just talked there about targeting specific races across the Flamme Rouge range in terms of the semi-finals to the Worlds. So you obviously have a key focus and a core focus to your own journey on e-cycling. What would your long-term vision as world-level e-cyclist be for e-cycling or esports itself? There's a big
Kate's
question.
pointing at me, so I'll answer that one. I hope that it continues on a upwards trajectory in whatever form that is. I don't know what the limit is for it. In terms of my personal goals, things like getting fourth at the Zwift Games, like that's pretty good. I'd honestly be happy with some similar performance goals in high level races going forward. I never saw myself having the potential to win something like that. So I'm just trying to get the most out of the races and results that I can get along the way. I know there's talk about the Olympics and stuff long term. I've certainly joked that my Olympic dreams are over, but who knows? They might come back to life as a near 40-year-old man one day.
I think that those dreams could certainly be alive for Kate. It seems like she's entering her prime here. You might be in the role that you were in the Nationals, and propelling her to victory with the energy that you were providing there. So, what do you think, Kate? What is your future goals? What do you see? What do you envision for yourself?
I think I'm still figuring it out largely, and seeing how the esports space, I guess, is changing and evolving. And yeah, it's kind of cool to consider that potentially one day, you might be able to make a living from esports. I feel like we're still a fair way off that at the moment, but yeah, it's cool to think, whether that might be possible.
Yeah, so maybe this series will be heading towards that direction. I know it's running from July 26th through August 11th. We're going to have Richard Vale on the podcast beginning of July to discuss the finalized details of the event. It's kind of there's a lot to unpack there, and Where can the listeners find out more about that, Emma?
Well, they can head over to flamrougeracing.co.uk. And of course, they can tune into the podcast once that is released later. Full coverage also is going to be given on Zommunique later. So keep your eyes peeled there for more information regarding Flam Rouge Racing and that tri-front platform format, which I think is going to be really interesting. Well, Chris, the vision that you had at the start of the Virtual Velo podcast looked like it might be coming true, which would be absolutely fantastic. So that first chapter in your story, Chris, could well be emerging.
Yeah, that's that's funny, and I also have something to tell the listeners. And first of all, I want to thank Josh and Kate. You were great guests, and I also want to thank you for kind of bearing with me through this. I recently received some terrible health news. I'll just start from the beginning. My father died when he was 53 years old of the only heart attack he ever had. I'm going to be 53 this year. My son is 24, and my dad never met him. With that in mind, when my son was born, I was a 190-pound ex-collegiate soccer player, weightlifter. I ran away from anything that involved endurance activity. I just wanted everything to go into my muscles and getting big and getting strong. When my son was born and my life was no longer just lived solely for me, I realized that was not the path that I really should be taking in my life. And I transformed myself and went from 190 pounds to 125 pounds and, racing and, obsessive about it the way cyclists get. And not only about the actual training and the racing and the methodical nature of that, but also with my diet. Like I knew what my fate was going to be. And I also went to a cardiologist and did all the baseline stuff. And, I rode my bike across the country 2 years ago and all these other things, right? And after COVID and the pandemic, I kind of let that slip. And I started feeling some palpitations in my chest, I'd say about 6 weeks ago. So I went to the cardiologist. He put me on a monitor and didn't really show anything. He said it was kind of, benign stuff, just a little extra beats here, but we're going to do some other stuff since you're here and because of your dad and whatever else. And I should also mention my brother is 6 years younger than me, and he has 13 cardiac stents. So we certainly have a significant history. So we did some tests, and one of the tests was an echocardiogram, and it showed some things which could be explained away with the whole athlete's heart scenario. A little bit of bigger right ventricle, some enlarged arteries and things. So, and the EKG was the same way. So then he sent me for this test. It was a coronary calcium scan, and that was impressive. It showed some pretty crappy results. So last week, I went and got a cardiac catheterization. I'm in the health field, but I'm so like terrified of the whole institutionalized hospitalization and things. But I went through it, and it kind of showed some really terrible things. I have 80 to 90% blockages in 4 of my arteries. So the long and short of it is that I have to go in for open heart surgery in less than 48 hours from now. And I've been trying to do everything that I've been doing. You probably haven't seen me, not posting or whatever, because I'm trying to maintain some sort of normalcy because this is really difficult. So, and the reason why I'm mentioning it is because a lot of the things that I do, and it actually came out in this podcast, is because I want to make an impact. I don't make any money off of this. It's all just a passion project for me. And if I can tell my story so that somebody else who's in my position, who's a high level athlete and who's pushing themselves to the brink and would never think that they could possibly be in my position, because I'm still having a hard time dealing with it. It's really difficult to contemplate. If that prompts somebody that's listening, or who I intend to write about it too, when I can finally wrap my head around it all. And, I obviously have a large journey ahead of me, but if it inspires somebody to get checked out and, maybe it stops something catastrophic from happening, then maybe I can kind of justify that it's happening to me. And I feel terrible putting this on the two of you because you've been such great guests, but I think it was significant to put out there. And, hopefully, when Emma and I partnered up, our goal was to put out a podcast every 2 weeks. And that's going to be my next goal, is to be back here in 2 weeks. So hopefully I'll be able to do that. But thanks, because that wasn't an easy thing to say. So we'll see how it goes.
Chris, I know how difficult that was for you to say. I really do. And our heartfelt, hugs and love is coming from everywhere for you at the moment. And we are all there supporting you on your journey. And I completely agree with you. If you inspire just one person listening to this to seek medical help or attention or advice about something they are just not sure about, then, thank you ever so much, Chris, because, you do make an impact, and not just in the cycling scene.
Well, that's very nice to say, and I just I appreciate both of you, Josh and Kate, for coming on, and for you, Emma, for those kind words. And hopefully, I'll be able to tell everybody about Chapter 2 and moving forward when we get together again.
Yeah, that leaves us to say thank you very much to our two guests today, Kate and Josh. Thank you for joining us. It's been great to catch up and find much more about you both and your racing plans. If you are interested in hearing more, you can subscribe to the Virtual Velo podcast or follow the Zommunique on social media. Thanks for joining us for episode 43. Until next time, enjoy your riding. We'll see you again soon for another episode of the Virtual Velo Podcast.